For those who don't know, I'm a U.S. Army combat veteran. Many have said that it's not possible for a black person to be conscious and having served in the U.S. military. I'm living proof that that's untrue. It was while serving in the U.S. Army that I was first introduced to the science of psychological warfare. The U.S. military calls it PSYOPs, which is an acronym used for psychological operations. I immediately found the subject very fascinating, so I started researching it much more further than my job description required. I spent many days visiting the Fort Benning War College located in Columbus, Georgia. I read many of its manuals on psychological warfare published by the U.S. Department of Defense. It was then that I began to gain a clear and accurate understanding of how the white society now covertly continues its control and subjugation of black people. It's how it was proven to me that the white society had never stopped subjugating black people. They merely developed more sophisticated covert ways that allows them to continue doing so without any black resistance. Case point and proof. One of the manuals stated that the most effective way to control and subdue a large targeted population without having to actually physically fight them is by bombarding them with propaganda that misleads them to believe that their core problem lies within themselves. When people have been misled to believe that their core problem is an internalized one, this shifts their collective aggressions away from their enemies and redirects it towards and against themselves. Even those among us that are not conscious can easily see that this is precisely what has been done to black people by the white society that writes all of our narratives. Another manual stated that in order for a dominant group to maintain its position of social dominance over its subordinate population, they must condition the subordinate population to accept their subordinate status within the society. It stated that to achieve this, the subordinate population must be denied of a racially affirming education and must instead be given an education that exalts only the dominant population. This conditions the subordinate population to perceive themselves through a false inherent subordinate identity that makes them accept their subordinate status within the society dominated by the dominant population. This is the true reason why black people learn more black racially affirming facts from each other than we do so from within our white governed schools. I also learned that after the assassination of a group's national leaders, that many will then perceive celebrities of their racial group as being informal leaders, and that you can then use those celebrities to negatively steer their culture. I also learned from another manual the true reason why they socially engineered us to call each other by the N-word. During the 1960s, when black men called each other brothers, this had a unifying effect upon our culture, which led to us implementing the most successful unified protests in U.S. history. Therefore, through media social engineering, they manipulated us to call ourselves by the N-word. This made it easier to divide our ranks. And when we call ourselves by the N-word, we also dehumanize each other, which makes it easier to mistreat each other. This is a fact that the military has known for a very long time. Case point and proof. During the Vietnam War, to ease the American soldiers' anxieties about torturing and killing the Vietnamese soldiers, they were taught to refer to them by derogatory Asian slangs. This dehumanized them and made it easier to kill and torture them. And this has been done to black people when we call each other by the N-word. Case point and proof. Have you ever closely listened whenever a black man speaks of a previous attack against another black man? As he presents the detail of the attack, he will say, I hit that N, I kicked that N, I shot that N, etc., N-word. The N word is actually being used to dehumanize the other black man. But if you ask the speaker to retell the details of the attack against the other black opponent, but replacing the N word with the word my brother, he will then become psychologically, he will struggle to retell the story. The more brutal that his behavior was against the other black man, the more difficult it becomes to tell the story without dehumanizing his opponent. The white prison industry is filled with black men that easily kill another black man because they perceive them as being nothing more than the N-word. Furthermore, during the Iraq War, I was an infantry sergeant. Upon arriving in Iraq, my unit encountered a PSYOPs unit. As again, I said PSYOPs means Psychological Operation Unit. I asked their commander, why were they there? He replied by explaining that while the U.S., through its military strength, could win the ground war, that it, however, could not win the loyalty of the Iraqi people unless their minds were manipulated to think in ways that support the objectives of the U.S. government. To meet that objective, the U.S. military took over all of the Iraqi major media outlets and started inundating them with propaganda designed to manipulate their minds to think in ways benefiting the U.S. The U.S. even replaced their school textbooks with those written by the U.S. The official reason given for doing so by the Pentagon official was that we were merely removing all mentions of Saddam Hussein from his curriculum. But the truth is that the students were being miseducated to think in ways that makes them more accepting of the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq. The more that I researched about military PSYOPs campaigns and also witnessed it being deployed in Iraq against the civilians, the more apparent it became that I was learning firsthand what has been done to our people. The U.S. was following the same blueprint of what was successfully done to we Africans. The similarities were too great for me not to have made the connection. I literally felt like the spook who sat by the door. I know for many of you that reference, you're too young for that to understand that reference. However, I then pledged that after retiring from the military, that I would commit my life to getting this information out to my people. I wrote letters sending my findings to many black civil rights organizations, including the NAACP national headquarters. I also reached out to local chapters. Although everyone acknowledged the validity of my findings, they refused to act upon it and instead treated me like a radical. Many were literally visibly afraid of what I was disclosing. I later came to realize that the hands of those organizational leaders are tied. If they joined me in spreading true black liberating information, they then risk losing their 501c3 tax exemption status that is owned and controlled by the U.S. government. I therefore went to social media teaching the truth. Initially, it was great. I had reached 200,000 followers, and my page was visited with an average of 400,000 people a week. That page was eventually shut down, and all of my pages that followed are heavily shadow banned. I'm not complaining. I'm just sharing because I know that when you're making it rain truth, that you have to accept all the mud that comes with the rain. In spite of being heavily shadow banned, I keep posting the truth nonetheless. Because when the truth is repeated, it will eventually prevail over lies. This is because the truth has a vibrational frequency that's more powerful than any lie. And once a mind has been expanded to a greater radius by learning the truth, it can never return to its original smaller dimensions because the truth won't allow it to. Once the truth has been seen, it cannot be unseen. Therefore, the truth is literally like a virus within a system of white supremacy that sits upon a throne of lies. If learning the truth couldn't liberate us, what oppressive forces would be working so hard and unrelentingly behind the scenes to prevent Black people from learning the truth? Brothers and sisters, please keep sharing, learning and sharing. One love and peace.